Hello. Today we're going to talk a little bit about something no one likes, I don't think. That's nymphing under an indicator or suspending nymphs. And it's not the most fun way to fly fish. I don't think anyone would say that it is. But it can be one of the most effective ways. And when nothing else works, it's usually the only thing you can do and your best bet. So I'm going to talk about three different things. The indicators themselves, the nymphs, and then casting something like an indicator rig. And now we're talking about just suspended nymphs. So you're talking about something like an airlock, which is an indicator like this. So you're floating something on the surface of the water to buoy the nymphs up. We're not talking about using a piece of yarn to indicate a strike on a nymph that's just free floated on tippet. We're talking about using a bobber, basically. I know you hate when I say it, but it's a bobber to suspend the nymphs in the water column. So we're going to look at the nymphs, the indicators, and how to cast that crap, because it can be a absolute mess. So let's look at indicators quick first.
All right, so let's look at indicators. Something very popular that most people that fish an indicator use. This is called an airlock. It has a it has a nut, basically. You pull off of it, and a rubber washer goes down on top of it. Then you can see there's a slot there. You put your tippet through that slot, rubber washer, and screw the nut back down on top of it. This one is missing its rubber washer because I lost it about 5 minutes ago, just setting this up. One of the reasons I don't like them, the other reason I don't like these is because the washer and that nut and this whole threaded assembly make it, I feel like it's off balance. Like when you cast something that's, I can't even describe what I'm trying to say, a solid piece of whatever, it feels better. This just feels funny on the end of a line to me. Not the worst thing in the world. A lot of people love these, swear by them. I like the thingamabobber a little bit better, and I don't have any to show you because I lost my last one filming the footage you're going to see here in a little bit. They come in a bunch of different sizes. That's something else we should touch on. You should always fish an indicator to the size of the nymphs you're going to use. So if you're using something that's huge, let's see here. If you want to use, like a big stonefly nymph or something like that, you're going to need a larger indicator to keep that afloat. So you can't use a tiny 1/4-inch indicator because a big fly or two is just going to sink it, and then it's not going to do what it's supposed to. Not going to move those flies. It's going to drift them appropriately. It's going to suck them underwater. And you don't want that. So big fly, big indicator. Little flies, little indicators. My favorite thingamabobber is the glow-in-the-dark model because in the daytime, it's completely clear. I'm trying to show you a picture here. I'm sure I have one somewhere. But it looks like a bubble on top of the water. Sometimes it's a little hard to follow if you're casting it far away from you. But I think they are one of the most subtle and best indicator for your buck, I think, in my opinion. There are occasions where I won't use them. I like the little Pulsa stick-ons. They're basically a foam sticker, and you press both sides of the sticker onto your tippet. You can't use them with very big flies, though. There's not much to them. They don't float much. These corks are actually made out of cork, and they're cool because easy to see, float high, and you can really float a lot of weight on them. So if you're fishing big, heavy flies or split shot, these are a great option. This is a bit of an odd duck. I actually bought these off from some guy on eBay, and they're cool because they land softly. Something like a big airlock or one of these corks does not land softly on water, especially if it's soft, slow-moving water. They land pretty hard. Oh, there that goes. That's what's nice about these foam indicators is they land very softly. And the cool thing is you can even take them and trim these down, make them smaller. And this one's pretty big as it stands. But the idea is when you're picking an indicator, You got to be able to see it. So something white like that helps. Thingamabobbers and airlocks always come in all these crazy orange and pink and purple and yellow and red and green, whatever you could possibly want. So you got to be able to see it. You got to pick a size appropriate to suspend your flies. You don't want to get sucked underwater. And don't pick anything bigger than you need either, because it's going to be harder to cast. And you don't want that. When you got 2 or 3 flies, maybe some split shot, and you're casting that, you're going to get it tangled up if you're not careful. So you want to try and eliminate as much weight and as much extra bulk out of the system as you can. That's about it for indicators. Let's actually look at an indicator rig I have tied up. All right, this right here is basically the rig I was using in the video you're going to see here shortly. I was not using an airlock. I was using a small glow-in-the-dark thingamabobber because I think that clear ones work great during the daytime. They're very subtle. So I have my airlock, and then further down, try not to hook myself, I have I'm going to make it so you can see this, a beadhead hare's ear, focus please, with a hotspot on it there, a little orange hotspot tied in behind the bead. And then behind that fly, this is a size 20, maybe a 22 zebra midge. Look at that. I mean, you can tell that the knot on there is almost as big as the head of the fly. And this is 5X. That's something else we should talk about. The tippet you use for nymphs is not just because you don't want fish to see it. So you hear about people fishing small tippet when they fish nymphs. Keeping it invisible to the fish is one of the reasons. The other reason is the action of the nymph. So if you tie something like, where'd it go? You tie something like this tiny little zebra midge onto 2X or 3X, that tippet is going to completely determine what the fly does because the tippet is so heavy. And that is not going to look natural, and that is not what you want to do. What you want to do is tip it down far enough that the tippet is going to move and allow the fly to move naturally. So for something this small and this light, 5 or 6X, unfortunately, is where you got to go. If you got to go lighter than 5 or 6X, I basically don't want to do it. So I don't even think I own any 7X. It's getting a little ridiculous if you ask me, but to each his own. Some people are into that sort of thing. So for me, this is a pretty light system. I've got one, this is probably a size 16 beadhead, and that's heavy-ish, and that's basically all the weight in our system down to the real small zebra midge. And honestly, every fish I caught the other day, you'll see in this video following, was on the zebra midge. And I really like zebra midges for the fact that, you find midges in just about any body of water any time of the year. And they're always a good bet for a second fly or a third fly if you want to do that. Everyone likes a hare's ear, that's for sure. And again, like I said earlier, adjusting your depth is going to be one of the most important things you can do. So pick flies you think are going to work, or pick flies you like, pick flies you have confidence in, and then take this indicator and move it up and down and up and down and up and down until you find out where those fish are going to eat the flies. That is the best advice for nymphing I can give you. And like I said, this is a light setup that I was using. I was fishing in a tiny little spring creek that's at the deepest, 3 feet, maybe 3 feet deep. Most of it's 1.5 feet, 2 feet. So I didn't need a lot of weight to get down. And we're not going to address weighting things with split shot in this video. We're just going to talk about hanging nymphs off of an indicator, which is what we're doing. Now we want to talk about nymphs quick. Your best bet, of course, is knowing your entomology, knowing what bugs are in the system when you're fishing. But when you can't do that, you can always try and imitate things that are common, use an impressionistic pattern that looks like a whole bunch of different insects. You always have options to, the shotgun effect, cover all kinds of different forage at once. The most important part about the nymphs that you're going to fish is that you get them where they need to go, and that's usually deep enough in the water column or shallow enough. So you are going to adjust
your indicator up and down until you find that sweet spot. And now it depends on the time of year, it depends on the water, it depends on a whole lot of things, but sometimes the fish are on the bottom and you have to fish on the bottom. So that means you're hanging up every other cast. And sometimes that's what you got to do. And sometimes you got to fish that nymph, right in the surface, not in the surface film, but hanging right below the surface. So it's something, it's almost more important to adjust than to change flies. I think that for me, and we could cut to a clip of me fishing at some point, but for me, even these last couple days I've been fishing, way more important to adjust depth than change flies. I don't think I changed flies maybe more than once, but I adjusted depth 5, 10, 15 times, so you have to dial that in. It's more crucial than fly selection, I think. You can get close with the fly and be fine, but if you can't get the depth right, you're never going to catch the fish.
All right, like I was saying, there's a particular way I like to cast a rig like this. Roll cast downstream, water load, and then cast back upstream. Well, I like to do that basically every time I cast a nymph upstream on an indicator rig like this. And the idea is, in the consistency, you're always making the same motions, and it keeps you from getting tangles, making a mess of your tippet. When you've got all those flies and weights and indicators on the end of your line, it's easy to wrap them all around each other. So with your line hanging directly downstream, you're going to move your rod tip upstream, like you would cast a fly line normally. Upstream, accelerate to a hard stop, like this. Line will come around, just like you're making a loop, like you're casting overhead. Then what I'm doing is letting the indicator drift with the current and keep that as natural as possible. Bring it in, that was almost a fish. Bring it in line as you need to. Roll cast downstream, use the water to load the rod back upstream again. And over, adjusting your depth in between until you find what you're looking for. I think it's important to be consistent, so always make the same movements. So you're keeping your tippet elongated, not giving those flies a chance to wrap around each other. That's one of the most important parts, I think, in not making a mess. Not one of the most important parts in catching fish, but the less time you spend untying knots, the more time you spend fishing, I guess. And now I'm going to whiff on this fish trying to net it, but you're going to get a good look at those clear thingamabobbers I was talking about before. The fish got off the instant I leaned down to net him, which was awesome. And there's that thingamabobber right there. You can get them in all the normal thingamabobber sizes, but you just got to look extra hard. I think I usually buy them on eBay.